Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. You know, by my rough calculation, there are about 300 million people in the United States. Half of them are women. That means 150 million people. And it doesn't take a genius to figure that you can get at least 2 or 3 of those 150 million people to come out and make a statement. And that's what's happening. And one of the Democratic senators on the Judiciary Committee says if any woman brings a charge against a man for sexual misconduct, that woman has to be telling the truth, which means she's got 150 million people that she can call on if she wants to make charges. And what's happening is you've got a wonderful jurist, a man who says, I was a virgin until the time I got married and while I was in college, and yet the slander is coming against him because the left can't stand the thought that they'll lose control of the Supreme Court. That's the bottom line. But in our judicial system, for hundreds of years in Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, a person is presumed innocent until he or she is proven guilty. And what's happened is you cannot have a senator saying, just because somebody accuses somebody of something, it doesn't mean that he's automatically guilty. And what I'm calling right now is 3 or 4 of the really top senators to get in a room with Brett Kavanaugh, go over line by line as hard as they can, everything that can possibly come up and has taken place in his life. And then if they are assured, as I'm sure they will be, that he is completely innocent of these charges, then go out on the Senate floor and say, we stand with this man, and he is going to be confirmed because he's an excellent judge. That's what we have. But we cannot permit this character assassination to go on, because if we do, we'll never, ever get a decent Supreme Court judge. We can't allow that to happen. And this is, I think, is backfiring on the Democrats because it is such a blatant attempt to disrupt the process. And all these women are coming forward and, you know, well, I was drunk, but I'm not sure who was in the room, but maybe there was 4 or 5, or maybe there was 2, or maybe there was 3 or 4. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think the guy was Kavanaugh.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable.
It is.
Really.
And having Eddie, who represents that porn star, is saying, well, I've got another one. 150 million, of course he can get another one. You know? Yeah. I mean, how much do you have to get paid? Well, this is their moment of fame. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mitch McConnell is standing firm, and I'm proud of him. And what I'm telling you is going to happen, I do not believe that they will take a vote in the Judiciary Committee, because if it goes out a negative vote, it will be very hurtful. But the chairman, Chuck Grassley, has the privilege, as I understand the rules, that he can refer this nominee without recommendation to the full Senate, where Mitch McConnell says, we've got the votes, we're going to vote him in. And I think it's time we get this on the road. We've had enough of this. And there's a great judge, one of the most outstanding legal scholars in American history, actually, and we cannot have him derailed because of this nonsense that's being brought against him. You know, well, he was 15 years old, and I was 16 or 17, or he was 17, and I was 15, and so forth, and he held me down. Yeah, sure. Well, anyhow, it's almost, I think, Thursday the vote, the testimony, and then shortly thereafter it'll be referred to the Senate, and there'll be a vote very shortly before the Supreme Court takes up its fall term.
Well, Kavanaugh has written a letter to the leaders of the Senate Judiciary Committee. His defense comes as both sides get ready for Thursday's hearing in the Senate, and Heather Sells has the story.
Brett Kavanaugh is speaking out against his accusers and working to retake a narrative that has painted him as a perpetrator, a charge he has flatly denied from day one, as he did again Monday night.
I've never sexually assaulted anyone, not in high school, not ever. I've always treated women with dignity and respect.
In an interview on Fox News, he made his defense.
going into agonizing detail at some points, saying he was a virgin for years after high school.
I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter.
He not only asserted his innocence over Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's high school sexual assault allegation, he took on a new one. A Yale alum says he exposed himself to her at a college party.
I never did any such thing. Never did any such thing. The other people alleged to be there don't recall any such thing. If such a thing had happened, it would have been the talk of campus. The women I knew in college and the men I knew in college says it's inconceivable that I could have done such a thing. And the New York Times has reported that just last week, the person making the accusation was calling other classmates saying she was not sure that I had done this.
Kavanaugh repeatedly said he simply wanted a fair process. He also sent a letter in his defense on Monday to Senate Judiciary Chairman Charles Grassley and Ranking Committee Democrat Dianne Feinstein. He said he would not be intimidated into withdrawing and called the accusations smears and a, quote, coordinated effort.
It's striking to see a Supreme Court nominee actually use that word coordinated, because now he's invoking politics into the equation, and we really haven't seen something like this in a very long time.
On Thursday morning, both Kavanaugh and his accuser, Christine Ford, will go before the Judiciary Committee. Her lawyer is objecting to Republican plans for the use of an outside counsel to ask questions. The Senate Majority Leader is promising a Senate vote will come soon, and the president is showing full public support.
I am with Judge Kavanaugh, and I look forward to a vote. And for people to come out of the woodwork from 36 years ago and 30 years ago and never mention it, all of a sudden it happens. In my opinion, it's totally political.
Now Kavanaugh and his accuser will make their case to both the Senate and the country. Heather Sells, CBN News.
I think this hearing will be on. It'll be, well, the accuser is making all sorts of demands still against the Senate. And the Senate should stand on its own right. I mean, it's a sovereign body of the United States government and an honored branch of government, and they should not allow people to jerk them around and say, well, we want to insist on this and we insist on that. No way. I mean, Chuck Grassley knows what to do, and he's going to do it well. Now, there's something else that's come up. The Justice Department has been under a subpoena from the Congress asking for certain documents, and they have refused steadfastly to provide the documents. And actually, it's almost as if the Justice Department, Rod Rosenstein, has been accusing Congress and threatening Congress. Congress has a duty under the Constitution to investigate things and to take oversight of the administrative agencies. And this so-called idea of the independent judiciary, I mean, it's nonsense. It's a branch of Congress. Now, the question was, Congress was moving to impeach Rosenstein for actions that he's done. Now, there's an article in the New York Times saying that he wanted to bug the president. And then he's denied, I didn't really say that, I was just joking, and so forth. Well, he's the one who appointed the special counsel, who happened to be his buddies. He set up the parameters of what this special counsel is going to do. It's opened a floodgate of annoyance against the president, and we find a number of people in the FBI who've been texting one another saying, how do we defeat Trump? And this whole thing is like a cesspool, and somebody's got to get to the bottom of it. And I don't think the president, though, is going to be able to fire Rosenstein now. After the election, I think he will ask for a new attorney general. I think he'll ask for a new deputy attorney general, and maybe he'll ask for the Justice Department to start cooperating with the Congress. But anyhow, Ephraim Graham has more on that story, so keep your eyes open. It's one of those things that the president, as he's draining the swamp, part of the swamp exists in the Justice Department. Ephraim.
Pat, President Trump plans to meet with Rosenstein Thursday to discuss his future with the administration. Rosenstein was summoned to the White House Monday as reports speculated he was going to resign because he thought the president was going to fire him. This meeting comes after that New York Times report Rosenstein talked about recruiting cabinet members to remove President Trump from office early in his term under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. But UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo both say they were never asked about taking that action.
No discussion with me about the 25th Amendment anywhere either. So you can now report that there are two senior leaders that have said that your question was ludicrous.
Analysts say Trump's relationship with Rosenstein has improved after some rocky times, and they believe Democrats would accuse the president of interfering with Robert Mueller's Russia investigation if he did fire Rosenstein. The two men will meet Thursday after the president returns from his trip to the United Nations. The president addresses the UN General Assembly today, where he's expected to talk about improving relations with North Korea after calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man at the UN last year. But President Trump now says he may have a second summit with Kim. Monday, the president called on world leaders to fight what he called the scourge of drug addiction. American pastor Andrew Brunson could be released from Turkey at his next court hearing October 12th. That is according to the Wall Street Journal. The nearly two-year-old saga has led to an international crisis between the two NATO allies. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, there's much more at stake than just world politics.
The Turkish government moved Pastor Brunson from jail to house arrest in July. Although the 50-year-old pastor has ministered in the country for more than 2 decades, the Turkish government charged Brunson with conspiring against President Erdogan's rule during a 2016 attempted coup. The Trump administration calls those charges bogus and has made securing Pastor Brunson's freedom a priority.
I don't think there's ever been any administration, any president that has brought up a prisoner of conscience, a prisoner who's in prison because of his faith, more than any other one than President Reagan did for Natan Sharansky. So this is historic.
And the Trump administration went beyond talking, leveling sanctions on Turkey that put its currency into a free fall.
All of the secular media, without exception, are saying, a pastor, who cares about a pastor? The trade with Turkey is much more important. The money and the value of the lira is much more important. But the Trump administration said, no, a pastor who's falsely accused and is in prison is important to us, and we're willing to really put our money where our mouths are, and they're taking a strong stand.
Egyptian-born Michael Youssef says other nations are paying attention.
Now, the world is watching this. They are not ignoring this. They know that they're going to be next unless they stop persecuting Christians.
Franklin Graham called Christians to pray and for the U.S. to be careful.
First, I would ask everybody who's watching right now, the Christians, to pray for Andrew Brunson. He's been falsely accused. This is just a sham. Turkey, we have to remember that this is a country that is fast becoming a radical Islamic state. I think we need to get Brunson home, and we need to be very careful with whatever we do as a country with Turkey until they change leadership and change the direction they're going.
Karam says there's much more at stake than an international crisis between NATO allies.
There's been many people, ourselves included, that believed God was going to do something in Izmir, the ancient Smyrna, Izmir, where Andrew Brunson is today, that was going to impact not only Turkey, but all the nations around it. Because it's clear that Andrew Brunson is in prison or under arrest for one reason, and that's his hope and faith in Jesus Christ as the Messiah, not only of the West, but of the entire world.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Prayers must continue. Pat?
Well, you know, Turkey has been a very strong ally. It was called at one time the weak man of Europe. And, you know, when they got through the Ottomans, then Turkey was sort of left adrift. And then there was a radical, so-called Young Turks, you remember that term? They took over the country and made it into essentially a democratic, secular state. And they have prospered since then. Now we have a man who wants to make it a radical Islamic state, Erdogan. He wants to be a dictator. He wants to be another caliph. And he seems to be anti-Israel and anti-U.S. and anti-so forth. Well, he arrested this one man on the charge that he was spreading falsehood and heresy and so forth and trying to undermine his government. And what Pastor Brunson was doing is preaching the gospel. So through the work of Jay Sekulow and the American Center for Law and Justice, there's been a tremendous feeling in the Oval Office that America should not permit Turkey to do what they've been doing. And it has cost Turkey dearly because the lira is plummeting. The Turkish economy is going down the drain, and they begin to realize that well, action against Christians is not a smart move. And as that piece we had from Chris shows, all the nations in that area and all around the world are watching. And if any country begins to mistreat Christians in their midst because of their faith, then they're going to pay consequences. The United States hadn't been that way before, so I congratulate one more time the president. That's one more thing he's done, and it's really good. So I think Andrew Brunson is going to come free. The Turks can't stand the pressure. It's just too much. I mean, you put sanctions on them. I mean, it's really hard. They can't do business in the international banking community. And when we put serious sanctions on a country, we can bring it to its knees, and that's what's happening with Turkey. Well, Ephraim, you've got a story now about something that's alarmed us. Hurricane Florence now has become one of the worst natural disasters in the history of the United States, up to $50 billion. Ephraim?
That's right, Pat. Hurricane Florence still causing chaos in South Carolina a week and a half after it came ashore in the United States. Rivers are still rising and people are being told to evacuate. One area was predicted to flood for the first time since record keeping began before the American Revolution. In North Carolina, Governor Roy Cooper says Florence is gone, but its devastation is still with the state. The economic research firm Moody's Analytics estimates Florence has caused about $44 billion in damages and lost output. That would make it one of the 10 costliest hurricanes in the United States. As you can imagine, personal stories of the aftermath of Hurricane Florence continue to unfold, like the story of Keith Smith. Keith is disabled, lives on his own, and was completely overwhelmed when floodwaters ravaged his home. So he did the only thing he knew to do. He called Operation Blessing for help.
This whole room was filled with memories and things that just pile up in life that you don't know how you wind up with them, but there's so many things there that you just don't know what you've got.
Just last Friday, Keith Smith could only describe his situation as overwhelming after Hurricane Florence left his New Bern, North Carolina home under 3 feet of water. His cleanup dilemma was especially complicated because Keith is disabled after a car accident left him with limited mobility.
Not be able to take a step in the right direction for fear that it just won't be enough to make a dent in the problem. That I knew I would just be wasting my time, just one person there trying to fulfill the need. I didn't know how I was going to get this accomplished.
But Keith's solution was just a phone call away.
I called Operation Blessing and I asked for help, and the good Lord provided. People that have showed up here have become lifelong friends. They've given unselfishly, and that's so important to me.
James Bauckham was one of the Operation Blessing volunteers that sprang into action for Keith.
It was a lot of stuff in here, so I mean, don't underestimate what you see now. You just see the results of some good, hard cleaning right now.
James and the OB volunteers from Without Limits Church spent the weekend gutting Keith's home, getting it ready for refurbishing.
Volunteering in a situation like this is a good thing for the spirit, the soul, and it's just it's giving back to the community that you live in.
The team made sure to take time out to pray for Keith.
We prayed, and we've had fellowship all day long here together and laughed together, and just You know, they've lifted my spirits up.
Keith is forever grateful to the Operation Blessing team that brought in a lot of calm in the midst of a storm.
These right here are tears of joy because I'm so relieved. My soul is in a better place today than it was yesterday. And I am so grateful to the help that you guys have given me. You know, I can never express enough gratitude.
Operation Blessing, indeed, the calm in the midst of the storm. Pat?
Can you put yourself in the position of that man? He's in a wheelchair. He's helpless. Doesn't have much money. Everything he's got has been washed away by that terrible hurricane and the floods that followed. And there he is in a wheelchair, helpless. What does he do? Well, he can call on FEMA, and they'll take maybe 6 or 8 months to get to you, or maybe never, and there'll be some bureaucratic red tape. But he needs to have help now. He needs his home. He needs some place to live. He needs, some food. He needs some water. He needs medicine. What does he do? I mean, just put yourself in his place. Think of somebody that's helpless in a wheelchair. They can't move. How does he get help? Well, first of all, he called on the Lord. Secondly, he called on Operation Blessing, and guess what? No bureaucracy, no red tape. They were on the scene like right on the bat. And a team came in to help, and they began to bring water, and they began to bring hot meals, and they began to bring tarps for the roof, and they began to bring all these supplies. And then a group of people began to rip out the drywall and take the mold out of the way and clean all that mess up. And, oh, man, you can imagine he's sitting in a wheelchair and he's thinking, oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Thank you what's going on in his mind. And put yourself in that place. Well, Operation Blessing, the laughingly say, is the first in and the last to go. I was down there in Katrina for a long period of time, and we were doing all that kind of work. And it was tough because it was so much flood and so much disaster. Same thing in North Carolina. And so, again, the number to call in terms of giving money is Operation Blessing, CBN, Virginia Beach. It's, well, you can call in if you want to. It's 1-800-700-7000, or it's CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia. We're still out there because those floods haven't crested yet. Maybe the next day or two, it may be some of the worst flooding they've had. These are good people in North Carolina. They're good people. They're good people. But there's only so much you can do when there's nothing left. And we want to help them, and we're going to help them. And Terry's got more. What you can do?
Well, I do. The relief efforts in North Carolina are ongoing. You know South Carolina is going to be in desperate need as well. Operation Blessing needs your help. We are going to be accepting volunteers at the Without Limits Christian Center. That's located at 102 Washington Post Road, right in New Bern, North Carolina, what we've been hearing about so much. Daily at 8 a.m., Monday through Saturday. Operation Blessing will provide work assignments, tools, and lunch. Free housing will be available if you're a volunteer coming from out of town, but you must register in advance. So if you'd like to be a part, if you're able to be a part of helping there, just call this toll-free number. It's 1-800-677-7974. It's 1-800-677-7974, or you can go to ob.org. But we need your help.